podcast where we talk about everything leadership. And specifically, we're talking about more on the technical side of the world. Joshua has graciously accepted our invite to come and talk. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me back, Bill.
Yeah. So for people that this is their first episode, can you give us a quick origin story?
Yes, The Big Word is the company that I run. I came into it when it was an existing company. It was like a $6 million company. It was pretty much a local business. It was an agency. We did a whole technology and digital transformation of it. It's gone through very significant AI disruption from the very early machine learning, then around the 2010s neural network machine learning, which a lot of people knew as translation memory or machine translation. And we had to reinvent ourselves, and each time. And then we then had obviously the LLM or the generative AI disruption come along around 3 or 4 years ago now. I know it's hard to believe that we're 3 or 4 years into it. And what I found is these aren't revolutions. These are evolutions. We had the machine learning in the 60s. And ever since I was a little boy, I had a digital thermostat. And that in itself is AI. And then the thermostat got smarter. It understood what time we're going to wake up, and we could put a timer on it. And then it could actually use sensors to get even smarter, and you didn't even need to tell it all the information.
Right.
In the same way, we've seen an evolution in the Big Word. I sold the company as CEO and part owner of it in 2021 to private equity. And since then, I've continued as its CEO, but then I've been investing in other startups, including kind of tech startups and AI enabled startups, but also AI hedges. And it's not that I don't believe in AI. I just want to, from an investment perspective, look at the AI ecosystem more holistically and not just directly invest in AI disruption.
Interesting. Okay. Like, I can't ask you 5 questions in parallel, can I? I can only do sequentially one at a time. So, how big is Big Word right now?
So the Big Word we're just over $100 million in revenues.
Okay.
And we are growing every single year. And the way it works is it's like Uber. So most of our workforce aren't directly employed. They are the equivalent of 1099, or they are 1099 workers.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have about 500 people in our office who are employed. And, if you need an interpreter, which is the spoken word, a translator being the written word. I know outside of my industry, they're interchangeable. But if you need someone who's a linguist, you can go online and you can go onto our app and access a video, an over-the-phone human interpreter, or an in-person, and it works the same way as Uber does, where you click a button and someone arrives. Or you can access an AI linguist, and it's avatar interpreting and avatar translation. But long before that, we had AI translation, which is the written word. So all of the written word we do now is pretty much post-edit or human-in-the-loop machine translation or AI translation, or it's, highly tuned artificial intelligence. So where we'll say, okay, this is for a doctor's office, and we're going to tune it specifically in and around the type of medicine that doctor performs. So we do that as well. And it's all available through our app, and we only really sell to public sector, which is government or healthcare.
Interesting. That's a very niche market. It's like, that's it. You got this box of people.
It's niche, but someone was telling me that the boating market is worth $55 billion because 7% of all households have a boat, which blew my mind.
Wow.
And I'm thinking, well, my market is about $55 billion too. And the boating market doesn't seem niche. The consumer coffee market's around the same size as our industry. And it sounds radical, but if you think about it, we don't have borders digitally, and we still need to communicate. Now, 47% of all online communication can be done in English, but that leaves more than half that can't.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's not by person, by the way, that's by GDP. So, I know there'll be someone listening saying, well, that's not really true. Well, that's percentage of available dollars online.
Right. Right. It's interesting. It's so fascinating. How, since the topic of conversation is leadership, how do you guys manage the workforce? What is that like? Do you have on staff managers that have 20 people assigned to them, or like walk me through that?
So it's actually technology plays a huge role, and you can't outsource your management to technology, but you can use it to be a force multiplier of managers. So, for example, I should be able to go into our AI, for lack of a better word, command system
Hmm.
and write a prompt and say, give me my top performing call center, who in those call centers are performing better, suggest the KPIs I should be assessing them against, and or something completely different. Every single person at the Big Word gets a monthly and quarterly appraisal, and it's a set format. I should be able to map out where we have training needs, what kind of training needs we have. Now, just a year ago, I couldn't do that. I could run a Power BI report in a very rigid sense. I still wouldn't get anywhere close to that own information. I might be able to see a few KPIs from our call centers. Now I can actually say, build me the profile of our top performing salesperson and scan these resumes against it. So we utilize technology in that way to be a force multiplier. And we
Like
have
that.
a workforce of 15,000 people a year working for us. Now that's
Wow.
contractors and it's full-time employees. So we have to know a lot of information, and we've built AI into our apps. So just like Uber has an app that you and I are using, unless you're a stealth Uber driver, there's another app though that you and I aren't using. The taxi drivers use, and we have that too, and we call it a business in a box. And that goes to our linguists. And the idea is that they can accept, decline, and invoices for a job within 3 clicks. So we
Nice.
use the app really to help manage the people. We know where they are. We know how far they are from the jobs. We know their availability. And we're tracking all of that information with their permission. And again, we can see their availability and so on. So we manage the business through a mixture of these really sophisticated human architecture, and then obviously technology architecture that we deploy. And it's amazing. The business, from a profit point of view, has grown roughly in the last 7 years. It's grown 5 times. However, my employee base, not my linguists, but not my 1099, but my actual employed workers, or W-2s as we would say here in the US, that is shrunk by 25%.
Wow.
So yeah, and it's not that we're selling different products or we've got a different margin mix. It's actually that we're just very efficient at running the business. And that was because we have gone through these evolutions, whereas AI was something we sold to now AI is something we use and we sell.
Right. 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 And it sounds like you're incorporating it into the day-to-day workflow of the business really, really well. Which is,
Yes, I
yeah.
think part the reason we do, I've got an amazing engineering team. It's based out of the UK, but we have 2 people in India, and these people I'm just in awe of. I sit, I meet them. They talk a completely different language to me. They have different social skills to me as well, but I've figured out how to communicate with them.
Hmm.
And but they're brilliant and they have so much knowledge. But sometimes you need a dummy like me to come in to do it successfully. And why do I say that? Because I don't have a religion about technology. That might not go down very well with your audience. I'm not married to any technology. I'm not a big believer in any particular technology. And I ask questions that probably should be asked in a lot of these big transformation programs, but the people are too clever to ask them. So things like, where's all the data coming from and how are we all going to plug it in? Now, I can speak the speak. I can talk about the difference between a SOAP and a REST API and a data lake and a data warehouse. And I can throw all that stuff out, but I purposely don't. And I play dumb. And we then have very simple Josh conversations about where the data resides, how we're going to plug it in. And we start from the data perspective. And then we're not necessarily trying to create a technology solution. We're just trying to create a manual data solution. And
I like that.
then we can build the tech on top of that to make it easier and quicker. But what I have found in some of the companies that I've advised and been on the boards of is they buy these engines. And it's like a crate engine for your car. It comes in a box. Now, you can plug it into the internet so you can fool yourself that it's really, really good. And you might not be fooled. It is really good to an extent. But what you're getting is the same insight as every other competitor. But it's like a crate engine. If you can plug it into your car and you can get the timing right and you can get the amount of gasoline right that's got to be put into the chamber and everything works harmoniously, it becomes incredibly powerful for these insights.
Right.
And it's really difficult to do because HR have their favorite applicant tracking system and sales have their favorite management system for their sales, the CRM, and operations have like 3 different systems that they're using, 2 of which were coded in the 90s, and there's only one guy alive that knows how to work it. You know, we're like giving him vitamin supplements every day just in case he drops dead, and we're trying to get him to stop smoking because if he dies, who the hell is going to know this code that is coded in? And you get all this data. So you need a dummy like me to come in and say, I don't care about whether it's a lake, an ocean, or a warehouse. Where is this data? It doesn't all necessarily need to be in one place. Why does it need to be in one place? Why can't we just plug these APIs in and figure it out that way? Why can't it work like a website where ChatGPT can just crawl it or Claude can crawl it? And then you get, you know, this kind of dummy conversation, which actually I think helps the tech people organize everything and then plan everything. And then you've got to report back to me because I'm making a big investment. I'm writing a check of my own investors' money and my money for millions of dollars. So I want to know, not in a Six Sigma boring 3-hour, you know, blue, you know, is it yellow and is it red and, you know, all of these forms. I want to know really like how it's working. I want to see it work. It's amazing how many times I sit in project meetings and they don't come ready to demo what's being built. They just come with a form or a PowerPoint. And I say,
Oh,
I'm not interested in
interesting.
any of that. Seeing is believing.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and you know, so I think so. This is a very long way of answering a very simple question, but we use a lot of technology and we hire people and I can't hire the best people in the world all the time. I know that's a terrible thing to say on a podcast, but I'm sick of hearing CEOs say, I have the best team in the world. Well, you can't all have the best team in the world.
Right. Right. Yeah. You know, you're totally right, though. Your honesty, it's 100% true.
You
Yeah.
can't, and I don't have $2 million to spend on a CIO and another $2 million to have a CTO so that they can argue with each other, and then another $2 million to spend on a CFO. I have a certain amount of money that I can spend, and then I'm only in certain geolocations, so I can only hire those people. So I hire the best people that I can, And these are usually people who really believe, who have a vision and a strategy, who aren't selfish, who want to really help other people, who want to work through the pain barrier.
Right.
Because, you start an investment program and money is cheap and everyone is getting fat and happy, and then all of a sudden we have a war in Iran and oil goes up, and all of a sudden you've no idea why, but the banks don't want to lend you any more money and your deals start falling through. And but you need those people to go through that time. So I hire really resilient, tenacious people who will think outside the box, who aren't just logical or creative. They're smart generalists, to use a Silicon Valley term.
I like that.
And then you combine that with technology, and it's painfully slow because you can't just be like, here, guys, here's Anthropic's new product, Claude. It's plugged into every system. What we did was we looked at the use cases and business cases and how quickly we get an ROI, and is it going to enhance the service that we deliver to the clients, and how's that going to affect our CSAT scores. And then based on that, one by one, the features come in until you're dropping them every hour, after a few months of doing it. And we are still scratching the surface. We still
Nice.
have like round 3, round 4, round 5 still to go.
That is very cool. Okay, so how much of the coding that's being done is done by people versus AI generated, or like how do you interleave those together?
Well, I just sent out a questionnaire to find that out. So I'll let you know when I find out.
Okay.
No one lets me know. They speak in riddles, and I bet a lot of CEOs that are listening to this will know this. You're trying to work out, your techies tell you AI is going to radically change the world, and yet they're still charging you hundreds of thousands of dollars per person, and they still need a team of 6 developers, and you still need an architect, and you need a program office on top of all these people, then you need a QA team. And I'm saying, didn't you just tell me AI can do all of this for me? And they'll
Yeah,
say,
yeah.
yeah, we're deploying AI. Well, why isn't it cheaper then? What's the point in AI if it's not cheaper? And they'll say, well, it's quicker. Well, fine. Okay, I'm happy it's quicker, but it's not quicker. In reality, it's still taking me long. Well, it would have taken longer. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't really have good ways to measure this. So I've done a lot of thinking about it, and I've come up with I don't want to say tricky questionnaire, but one that if you BS me, you're probably going to be caught out. Is going to be deeply analyzed, and I'm going to have some good answers for that. But actually, I don't, and it's one of those black holes like with your attorney. If you've ever hired an attorney, they charge you by the hour, but you have no idea how many hours they're going to spend on it, and you don't know how many hours it should have taken to write that contract. And I find working with software engineers a bit the same.
I totally get how that can be super frustrating. Yeah. Having been on the other side where I'm in it, do you guys do sprint reviews or anything like that? Like, are you guys agile?
Yeah, so we were, and we do
Okay.
sprints, and we do sprint reviews. But this again, I mean, I'm probably making myself the most hated man on your podcast. I hate agile. Agile is used as an excuse to not have a target. It's like I used to say to my tech team, you're like the equivalent of a sales team who wants an agile target. So I'm going to pay
Mm.
you $300,000 if you each do $1 million. And then they come back and they're like, actually, we're going to do $800,000, but we still want the $300,000. It's a moving target. When I make
Right.
an investment, just again, from a dummy point of view, I want to know what I can expect for that investment. I want to know when I can expect it by. And I
Right.
don't think Agile started out that way, but I believe it's, in the world of technology, it's almost been, and again, I'm making myself hated, abused, where you can then keep changing the goalposts of what you're trying to do and how much it's going to cost you, because you don't have a fixed specification under Agile.
Right. Yeah. I think, yeah, the way that my teams have gotten around it is we always had we started from the point of, and this is, it's not really waterfall, but we did some, like, this is what we're going to build for you in concept. And that's what we would build toward. And, we'd be like, we're going to deliver this in whatever it's going to take, right? It's going to be 8 months. And here's how it's going to function roughly. I like to start off with the user experience being available so that everybody knows what it's going to look like when it's done. I think it helps everybody to be able to do that. And then functional demos of whatever's been happening at every sprint release. Because you talked about the PowerPoints a minute ago, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's the worst thing to do to the execs, because you're not unusual. Most execs actually want to see something work. And so that was always one of the, even if we're just going to show you a command line API, like there's a terminal on the screen, here's a command line API, like whatever it happens to be, right? And that way it takes out the mystery.
Yeah, no, listen, I have a great relationship with our head of product, and they hide the engineering team away from me as much as they can, but I insist on meeting them in person every now and again, which is traumatic for them, I get. But it's probably interesting for your audience to hear this from the other way. And I say this kind of tongue in cheek, and it's kind of a bit of a game, though. In reality, they are telling me, and I fully understand it and I appreciate it, I don't know how much something's going to cost to build. I don't know how long it's going to take 100%. What I can do is I can map it out. I can put a plan together. Just like the sales team don't know how much they're going to sell. All they can do is look at how many leads they're getting, what their average conversion, and they can make a guess. But it's that transparency that I've driven across the big word, so that your guess is a real guess, and it's not a guess that gets you enough money that now we have to finish the project.
Right. You said something a minute ago that's sticking in the back of my head. And I got to ask about this. You mentioned you hired people for resilience. How do you do that?
I'm looking for people that have gone through the challenges and the pain barriers before. So I once hired someone, and he was very, very successful. I didn't hire him, actually. I interviewed him. He was very, very successful. Aced his interview. I was his final interview. We did scorecards. We brought outside people, and it was a major hire. And we went out for dinner, and he said, I asked him, what real challenges have you had to overcome? Like, when has it really gone wrong? Because this is like a guy that seems to, everything he touched turns to gold. And he said to me, I honestly can't think of one. Like, I have a playbook, and I don't always win, but I trust the playbook. And if I played my plays enough times, I win enough points that I overall win the game, if that analogy makes sense.
Yeah.
It's like tennis. A lot of great tennis players actually lose over half the points in a game, but they'll always win the game because they win the right points. And he was making that point over dinner, and I actually believe him, but I didn't hire him. So if you're going to really hire for tenacity, it means you are going to have to get the battle scars. Which means you have to get people who have gone into battle and sometimes learned from it. It's very hard to learn from success. You don't reflect on success in the same way. You ask people on your podcast, what made you so successful? They really can't answer that. You say, what was your biggest lesson? And they'll go into a whole spiel for the next 20 minutes. It's much easier. They've reflected on it.
Yeah. God, I'm just thinking, like, Is it legal to ask somebody about, tell me about like your three biggest failures, you know?
Well, I think it's legal.
Okay,
I
good.
uh, I like to try and pick a line on being as open as possible, but staying within the law. And I do think it's absolutely fine. And when I interview, I don't ask a lot of questions. I have a conversation like we are, and I'm selling
Mhm.
as much as I'm being sold to, because these typically people have a choice of where to go, and I'm
Right.
not going to be the best payer up front. A lot of the time, if you're working for me, there's a big pot at the end of the rainbow, but you're probably having to invest some of your own income by taking a lower income year in, year out, and then when the company recapitalizes, that's when you get your money. So,
Hmm.
I do want to know, like, what is it going to be like with you when we really disagree? And I found that the best way to do that is take them out into a different environment than a boardroom, like a
Right.
dinner, like a
Yeah.
lunch, like a coffee, befriend them and just ask them. Sometimes I get scared and I say things I wish I didn't. And you're going to do the same. Why? Because we suffer from a condition called being human. How are
Yeah.
you going to
Yep.
react to it?
Yep.
Quite often they will tell you, and they will tell you honestly.
Hmm. Yeah.
I've had people say, I just crumble under that. I'm just not good
Mm.
at criticism. I had one person, a lady, she's like, I was on the volleyball team, I was a volleyball champion at college, and we did hire. We hired her, but I knew I had to change my management style for her, and it was worth it.
Interesting. Yeah. It's the stuff that you're talking about. I really like the adaptability, and um, the way that you're thinking about their comfort actually as being more important than your own. Like that's a really, um, in my experience, that's a key element.
It's two ways, right? We're all
Yeah.
humans. Uh, you know, I know a number of very high profile billionaires, and I know them personally. They're just regular people.
Right. Yeah.
They have all the same fears. They're not happier than anyone else.
Right.
They're not sadder than anyone else on average. They have all the social anxieties. You know, they don't worry about paying their healthcare bill. They don't worry about certain things like that, but they have other worries
Right. Right.
that you and I don't have, that we might think are nice to worry about, but to them it's real worry. So we're all humans, and I think that the workplace has been overly sanitized. For example,
Yeah.
in our business, we used to have loads of weddings. It was a real celebration. I felt it was actually a big part of the company that so many people met at work and so many people got married and had babies because we were in business and because they came to work from us. No one would dream in this day and age, and I don't blame them, of asking someone in the same office on a date. It's like a good way to kill a career, and we've over sanitized it. And
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
not good for business because it's become not human. Now AI has come along, and AI is not human. It's really good at faking it, but it's not human. So the humans have to find a differentiator, and I've got the answer: be human.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, I totally agree with that. Yeah. I'm, um, I've been talking with a group of people who are trying to figure out how to have, um, AI be leadership and get the humans out of there to some degree. And I'm like, that's not gonna work.
Well, they
Um,
better hope it not works because then they're out of a job too.
well, yeah, that's kind of the thing, It's like
Listen,
people. No,
AI,
go.
AI can fake empathy, but we innately know it can fake it, and it is fake.
Right.
Now, I had some bad news in my personal life a while ago, and I drive a Tesla, and in Tesla it has a Grok where you can put it on therapist mode. For 20 minutes, I talked to Grok like it was a real therapist. And then at some point, I'm at a red light. I'm like, oh my God, what am I even saying? Who am I even talking to? I should be calling my wife.
Yep.
You know, that's the thing is it can fake it for a while, but I believe we innately don't trust anything that's not human.
Yeah. Yeah.
We can be fooled for a while and sometimes a long while. But it's getting to that stage on YouTube now where we all really enjoyed those informational AI videos that kept popping up in us
Hmm.
in our feeds. But I'm getting so many of them, and there's so many like people criticizing them. I now don't trust them anymore. But for
Right.
a
Right.
while, you know, I would invest on the back of some of the information I was getting off that. And now I want to see and I want to speak to people and I want to build a relationship. I want to get to know them. And I crave that. And I come into the office. For 3 years, I worked from home over COVID, and I could have stayed working from home. But I'm speaking to you now from my office outside. I've got people, I've got humans, I can have conversations with them. And I think it's really important for younger people than you and I. So if you are 21, 22, you really don't know how to communicate. I don't know if you got kids, but
I do. Yeah. They're both in their early 20s.
yeah, and I've
Yeah.
got younger kids than you, they're in the teens. When they write to me, they don't know how to communicate, and I often WhatsApp them back to say, please write a proper message because one day you'll have a boss who's my age and you need to know how to communicate with them. So
Good parenting.
we need to bring these people in, and I've actually written to their school to say you need to do communication lessons because they don't know how to talk to each other. I listened into the kids talking to each other, and they'll talk as if it's a text, like one word answers,
Hmm.
or an equivalent of an emoji word.
Right. Right.
And these are private schools where they're feeders for Ivy Leagues, but yet they're not ever going to be employable, these kids, because they
Yeah.
don't know how to talk to each other.
Right.
So,
Right.
this is where I think the office space and human interaction is really, really important. And you're not going to replace leadership with AI, but you can to turbocharge leadership. You can let AI be a force multiplier because I can get all of the knowledge and I can combine it with my experience and understanding.
Right. Right. Yeah. Do you have a framework that you use that kind of encompasses that?
I spoke like a true technologist there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Sorry. Well, so
no, as you can probably tell, I wing most of life and I probably should build out a framework in and around this. But we have a lot of frameworks that are structural in our business from HR, but we don't
mhm.
have one for these soft skills. But I probably will make a note of it straight after this recording. And yeah, I think it's really important, how to have a phone call, how to have a meeting, how to go out for dinner with someone in the business setting. I can't be responsible for their
Yeah.
personal settings.
I'm very much a systems thinker. And this is, I freely admit this is before I got into engineering. I just, everything I looked at, I was like, how does that system work? Um, I think of the benefit for me of having a framework is it makes knowledge very transferable. And so, like math, I use math as my example of a system all the time. It's very, it's very consistent and granular, and irrespective of where you go to school on the planet. If I ask somebody what 7 times 3, your kids will say 21. My kids will say 21. You will say 21. Your employees in India are still going to say 21, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I think of effective leadership as being something where that's a very real possibility.
Yeah, I agree. And I think there should be a system. And there'll be people say that you can't always put everything in a rigid system, especially soft skills. But I would, if you're listening to this and you're thinking that, I would remind you about religion. You know, I went to a religious church and a religious Jewish school, and both of them have brilliant systems to kind of study the philosophy and really help with these skills. And I think, you know, we can look at some of those systems, you know, in religion to probably map the techniques across the training and to reviewing it. And,
Yeah.
you know, because quite often if you think about religion, and you might be anti-religious, but it doesn't matter. I think the example will be the same, you know, be good to your neighbor. You know, what
Right.
does that actually mean
Right.
when someone
Yeah.
says, what does that mean? And then you have that debate and it makes you think about it. And it's offline and it's real and it's human.
Yeah.
The thing
Yeah.
I like though is I love from an actual technique, I love role plays.
Okay. Yeah.
You know? And I role play even with my kids. You know, you're gonna speak to the teacher, you're in trouble. I'll be a teacher, you be you. Let's role play it. By the time
Nice.
they get to their teacher, they've already practiced this 3 or 4 times. Now, it's not like the
Yes.
role play is precise, but their brain is now trained to think quickly in that environment.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really good. I like that. I like that. Yeah. The framework that we came up with, and it's designed to be very flexible, right? Is first of all, it's mental models or beliefs, and having a set of, it's kind of like having a set of business principles. You know, there's a set of beliefs that our mental models that we found that the best leaders all have, even if they don't talk about it. And when I interview them, they like and ask them about them, they'll like say, "Oh yeah, of course, yeah, that makes sense." But people down farther in the org chart don't know about it. The second one's emotional resilience, and so you calling that out, I was like, "Oh, awesome! That's a really good one." We talk about it as a set of understanding your biology and understanding your brain chemistry. So it's a very heavily researched set of skills that we use. The third one, you're talking about your kids and communication, is communication. How to get over social anxiety, how to do research effectively, and how to do persuasion effectively. Because if you can do those three things, then you can talk to anybody in the company. And your engineers will then be really comfortable and happy talking with you if they understand that. The fourth part's power dynamics. And the problem to be solved is people saying that's above my pay grade.
Yeah, I always use that excuse.
Yeah,
My
but you
favorite
can't.
excuse.
That's one of those things that used to really frustrate me. I mean, it still does when, you know, when clients are like, "Oh yeah, that's, you know, I'm not going to do that. It's above my pay grade." I'm like, but your boss, Josh, can't magically know this unless you tell him, right? And so we help people understand power dynamics and how to comfortably talk with you. And then it's just, what are the behavioral habits that the leadership needs to be doing on a daily basis? And that way you understand people's intrinsic motivation. Everybody's conversations are getting better, and it's very scalable. You know?
But when you do that, how do you? So you've got the system in your head. Is this a book or is this
No,
a
so
presentation?
I
How do you
haven't,
transmit that?
yeah, I haven't written the book yet, but it's a curriculum.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
so we sit down because, so the starting point was I was doing individual coaching starting like 15 years ago, because people would come to me and they'd be like, "Here's my struggle at work, blah, blah, blah," right? And so I was doing point solutions, basically like customizing it. And at a certain point, I realized, wait a minute, what people need is they need the whole stack. And it's way faster just to train them the whole curriculum. And the way that we do it is it's 10 weeks of training, but you start doing stuff on day one because I want the behavior change on day one.
Yeah, it
Right.
makes me think of a time when I used to train telesales. I used to
Mm,
take them into the downtown and make them preach. They could preach whatever they wanted,
nice.
any religion,
Yeah.
any product, any science, but you have to preach. It was, people dreaded this, they knew it was coming because it was famous, but
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
absolutely dreaded it. But up until that point, we would give them training on how to do it, how to connect with people. And a
Hmm.
lot of people used to say it was life changing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because we would train them in how to walk up to a stranger, how to get rejected comfortably, and which you don't, you just have to keep doing it, is a secret.
Right.
And then when you do get someone, how to give them a hook by asking them a question. And
Yes.
then preach. And people used to do it, and we all used to watch. And even the person who hated doing it, and sometimes these were people that would come across as very confident, or we wouldn't give them the job in the first place, but they weren't that confident in this environment, and then they would get back and they would say, wow, it's changed my life, like because it's a
Hmm.
whole set of communication skills, but it's also a skill of being able to sell. It's a skill of being able to get rejected. And I used to just sometimes ask them to change their mindset. So instead of saying how many successful people can you quote unquote convert to whatever you're preaching about, people used to preach about like the local rugby team. It was, sometimes they would do religion, but mostly it was something they knew and liked. And so, I would say, change your mindset. Go and see how many times you can get rejected. I'm not bothered about how many times you succeed, how many times you are rejected.
Right.
And
Right.
they would go on like days of rejection. We would run that in the call center, like how many people are going to reject you, and we'd actually make it a competition. And at the end, we'd always know and realize the smart ones would know anyway. I was just trying to get the number of calls up. And my point would be that the more times you get rejected, typically the more times you're successful as well, just because you put yourself out there more. And it's that, that's how I met my wife, and being a probably 3 out of 10, if I'm being kind to myself, I could marry a 10 out of 10 because I was comfortable getting rejected, but I was nervous.
Right.
There's a
Right.
difference between being comfortable being rejected and being nervous in the moment of the interaction.
Right. Right.
And and I train myself that way. And when you can sell, it changes everything. And you don't have to be a professional salesman, but you still have to sell. So if you are selling your idea to your boss on a way to, restructure some code, or you're
Hmm.
selling an idea that you should all come into the office 2 days a week, collaborate more. These skills are critical. I work with a lot of startups, and one of the things I realize is most of them fail because the head of the startup will not sell. Like they'll be getting the red letters, the investors will be closing in, the debt to equity people are trying to move in, and they still won't go out on a sales call.
Do you? Okay, so I got a question about that. Do you think it's because they have some degree of social anxiety?
I think that's part of it, but they seem to think that selling is like this dirty, scummy thing. And
That's the worst. Okay,
yeah,
back to mental models and beliefs, right? If you have the mental model, if you have that mental model, then yeah, you're hosed. Have you read Daniel Pink's book, Everybody Sells?
but I will now because
Yeah.
it's my
So
belief. Yeah.
yeah. So this is one of I think that's the title of the book. But it's one of Dan Pink's older books. And for me, that was super transformational because I was one of those people that thought that sales was a horrible thing. And I read that book and it was like a huge light bulb moment because I was like, oh, wait a minute. To your point, everybody, like, there's always sales going on. It's how you got your wife. right? And reading that book really changed my fundamental beliefs and mental models. Didn't make me any good at sales. Like I still am learning all that stuff.
But it was your basis, right? It
But
was
yeah,
your,
exactly.
like,
Yeah,
it's okay. And
yeah,
it's funny because I often say to my kids, remember how hard you used to fight me for an extra 2 minutes before bedtime? It was like I had never seen such a hard sell. It was like a boiler room in Wall Street would have been very jealous of this hard sell on why they should have 2 more minutes. And then I tell them that kind of effort, that kind of focus cannot be lost. Harness it because you're going to
right.
need that in life. And I
Yeah,
remind
yeah,
them quite often because I want them to be good at selling when they're older. And I'm pretty sure, at least one of mine won't go anywhere near being a salesperson. The other one could easily. But, you know, it's innate with us. It's innate in us all to sell as a young child. But for some reason, maybe it's societal, maybe it's, fear of rejection. As we get older, as soon as we get to say 4 or 5 years, I think we start losing that.
yeah. I think that's true. It's a. I'll have to think about that. Yeah, I think it's also that we don't hear enough stories of success around sales and of that being like a really winning um it there's no we don't have as enough stories about the salesperson as a hero
Yeah.
and
I mean,
like
look at
we
Mark
do.
Zuckerberg. Everyone
Right,
sees him as a geek. I
right,
guarantee you he's an amazing, amazing salesperson because he wouldn't have got the funding in the first place. He had tenacity, he had the ability to get rejected over and over again.
yeah,
We look at Elon Musk, he has somehow managed to convince people that $1 of profit in his business is worth $100. And
right,
that's
right,
why his business that sells like like not necessarily any more units than General Motors. I mean, maybe it does now, but it didn't, and it was still worth like 5 times.
right,
So
exactly.
if you
Yeah,
want to be, there isn't really anyone that's crazy successful in business that's not a great salesperson. And I don't think there's really many kids that aren't great salespeople. They're born that way. Think about how many people, and everyone's been a kid, even if you don't have kids. How many times did you beg your dad, just one more chapter, or mum, one more chapter? And then you
yeah,
settled for one more page because you couldn't get one more chapter.
right, right.
And, you're selling then, and
Yeah,
you are being
yeah,
rejected. And, so it's innate in us, but all of the great business leaders and some of the not so great ones have been great salespeople. But, and it's really a necessary part of any job. Have you ever considered why you do what you do, but other people are working in a pork pie factory?
have. And it's because people have asked me like, how'd you get to where you're at, right? And I have a very weird background, very circuitous path, and it's um, the first reason is um, growing up. My dad said, "I don't want you to follow my career path." My dad was in EOD
Yeah.
in the military, and he saw that as very dangerous, and he didn't want me to die trying to defuse a bomb. That basically was the bottom line. Um, and so I never had that, oh, I'm going to follow in my dad's footsteps. And when I got out of high school, he said, you can do anything you want to. Um, Go find something that you like to do that helps other people and then figure out how to make money at it. And so for me, it's always been like chasing my curiosity.
But it's interesting because you talked about your dad. And
Yeah.
when I ask people this question, which I like to ask them, they always give me different answers, but it's always about their childhood, good or
Well, yeah,
bad.
yeah, yeah,
And I think that we as leaders have to harness that. I have people who work for me in very senior leadership positions who grew up with no parents,
Mm,
and but I think we have to harness people childhood and what gave them strength and what gave them fears in order to really understand what drives them. I have someone who works very close to me and he tells me, I don't do it for money. I'm not interested in the money. I guarantee you, if I halved his salary, he'd be gone.
yeah, yeah.
So I asked myself the question, why does he have to say he doesn't do it for the money? Well, my personal belief is on that, and I could be wrong, he doesn't see money as a sanitary thing. It's a bit like selling, it's dirty.
Yeah.
And then I say, well, don't you want to give your child more security and and intergenerational wealth? Well, that's what I do. Well, that is money, but I don't need to rub his face into it.
Right.
So,
Right.
I always, as a leader, like to try and figure out what makes people tick. I'm very aware with what makes myself tick. I'm an adventure junkie. I'm seriously ADHD, which is why this conversation's gone all over the place.
But it's perfect, right? Like,
Yeah,
yeah.
and I'm absolutely in it for the money. I'm in it for a bit of the ego. That's why we do the podcast. I feel great giving back, but I also like chatting like this. And soon I'm going to
Hmm.
go home to my home with 3 girls, and I won't get a word in edgeways. So, you know, you have to, as a leader, understand what makes people tick. And again, going back to why we started this conversation, you can't replace that with AI. AI can do a lot, and it's amazing, but it can't be.
Yep. Yeah. This has been awesome. I'm looking at the clock and recognizing that I've had you for an hour, which is insanely valuable. Thank you so much. Um, every time you're on the podcast, like something new and awesome comes out, and I'm like, oh, I love that. That's great. It's cool. I really appreciate it. Thank you a ton.